You know how some days start normal, then one single person decides to turn your peace into chaos? That was our day. My daughter, Emily, was standing by the park gate after school, waiting for me to pick her up. Just 15 minutes of fresh air and sunshine, until Karen appeared. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-appointed protector of the neighborhood, clipboard always in hand, phone camera ready, and that permanent frown that could curdle milk. Emily told me later that she saw Karen storming toward her, heels clacking like a metronome of doom. "Excuse me," Karen barked. "Why are you loitering here?" Emily, polite as always, replied softly, "I'm just waiting for my mom." But that wasn't enough for Karen. Not when she'd found her next case. She whipped out her phone and started recording. "This is a private neighborhood," Karen declared, scanning Emily up and down. "You can't just stand here without permission. What's your name? Where do you live?" Emily tried to explain again, but Karen wasn't listening. Within minutes, she was on the phone, calling the HOA, then the police, telling them there was a suspicious minor loitering near the park. I pulled up right as Karen was waving her arms dramatically to the arriving officer. Emily's eyes were red from holding back tears. The moment I stepped out of the car, Karen turned to me like she'd just found backup. "Are you aware your daughter has been hanging around unsupervised for over 20 minutes? This neighborhood doesn't allow—" "Actually," I interrupted, "this neighborhood allows residents and their families to exist in public spaces." Karen scoffed. "You live here? Then you should know the rules. I'll be filing a complaint." The officer looked uncomfortable. Emily clung to my arm, whispering, "Mom, I didn't do anything." I turned to the officer and said calmly, "You might want to take her statement, because I'm not just Emily's mom. I'm Judge Monroe, and I believe false reports waste everyone's time." Karen's confident smirk faltered for the first time. The officer's eyebrows shot up. You could almost feel the power shift in the air. Karen had no idea her little neighborhood crusade had just turned into a lesson in accountability, and I had no idea how far she'd go next. The next morning I thought the incident at the park was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Karen wasn't the kind of woman to back off quietly, especially after being embarrassed in front of an officer. When I came home from work, there was a bright yellow notice taped to my mailbox. Formal warning, violation of HOA rules, unauthorized loitering and disturbance. It was signed by none other than Karen Reynolds, HOA Enforcement Committee. I stood there for a moment, holding the paper in disbelief. My daughter had waited for me after school, and somehow, Karen had turned that into an official violation. That evening, Emily peeked from behind the curtains and whispered, "Mom, she's outside again." Sure enough, there was Karen, pacing in front of our lawn with her clipboard, taking photos of our yard like she was documenting a crime scene. I stepped outside, calm but firm. "Karen," I said, "this is harassment. My daughter did nothing wrong, and you know it." Karen didn't even blink. "Rules are rules. Children cannot loiter unsupervised. We have to maintain standards around here. Some of us care about safety." Her voice dripped with false righteousness. I could almost see the satisfaction in her eyes. She thought she had the upper hand. "You don't make the rules, Karen," I said quietly. "You enforce what you think they say. That's a dangerous habit." But she smirked. "We'll see what the HOA board says after I present the footage." Footage. She actually had footage of my daughter sitting on a bench, looking at her phone. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She asked me if she'd done something bad. My heart broke hearing that question. I promised her the truth always wins. But in that moment, I knew I had to prove it. The next day, I called an emergency HOA meeting. The board hesitated, clearly intimidated by Karen's persistence. She strutted in with a folder full of printed photos, ready to make her case. "Your daughter," she began, "was loitering in a restricted zone. It's my duty to report all suspicious behavior." When it was my turn, I placed my judicial ID on the table. "And it's my duty," I said, "to remind this board that harassment under the guise of enforcement is still harassment." Karen's smirk faded again, but she still wouldn't back down. "You can't intimidate me," she snapped. I leaned forward. "I don't need to intimidate you, Karen. I'm simply going to let the law do its job." She had no idea what that meant yet. By the next week, Karen had officially declared war. If she couldn't humiliate me through the HOA, she'd try to shame my daughter directly, and she did it in the one place where rumors spread fastest: social media. One evening, as Emily sat quietly doing her homework, her phone buzzed. She froze. "Mom, she posted about me." Karen had uploaded a photo, zoomed in, taken from across the park, with the caption, "Unaccompanied minor seen loitering again. Parents need to control their kids." The comments poured in, some sympathetic, others cruel. Emily's eyes welled up. Why would she do that? Because Karen didn't just want rules. She wanted control. That night, I couldn't sleep. I reread the HOA bylaws, legal codes, and privacy laws until 2 a.m. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was determined. The next morning, I went straight to the police station. I filed a report for defamation and harassment, providing copies of Karen's posts and timestamps proving her pattern of stalking. The officer who'd been there that first day recognized me. "Judge Monroe," he said, "you've got a solid case here." That same evening, Karen stood outside again, talking loudly to another neighbor about keeping our streets safe. I walked up, every step measured. "Karen," I said, "take the post down." She turned with that same superior tilt of her chin. "Freedom of speech, dear. Maybe you should spend more time with your child instead of making threats." I smiled, calm, cold, and collected. "Good, I'll make sure to quote that in court." Her smirk faltered. "Court? Oh yes," I said softly. "You'll be hearing from my attorney soon. And since I'm a judge, you can expect the process to move quickly and fairly." 2 days later, Karen received a formal notice. A court summons for harassment, defamation, and violation of privacy laws. The moment she opened it, I saw her pacing in her driveway. Phone pressed to her ear, panic replacing her confidence. The neighborhood began whispering, not about Emily, but about Karen. Some even came to me privately, saying they'd been targets of her rule enforcement before. The scales were turning. But just when I thought the lesson had been delivered, Karen made one last desperate move, a move that would seal her fate for good. Karen's desperation was like a storm building in slow motion, loud, chaotic, and impossible to ignore. The day before the hearing, she decided to put on one last show for the neighborhood. That morning, I woke up to find a crowd gathered near my driveway. Karen stood there, waving a stack of papers and shouting, "This woman is trying to silence me. She's abusing her power because she's a judge." Phones were recording. Neighbors peeked through curtains. And right there, in front of everyone, she accused me of corruption, favoritism, and even endangering community safety. I stepped outside slowly, calm as ever. Emily stayed inside, watching through the window. "Karen," I said, "you might want to stop before you make things worse for yourself." She jabbed a finger at me. "I won't be bullied by you. I have every right to protect this neighborhood from people who think they're above the rules." The irony was almost painful. The same woman who had weaponized the HOA, lied to the police, and publicly shamed a child was now crying victim. Just then, a patrol car pulled up. The same officer from before stepped out, holding a document. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said firmly, "you've been served with a restraining order, effective immediately." The crowd went silent. Karen blinked. "What? You can't—" "Yes, ma'am," the officer interrupted. "You've been charged with harassment, defamation, and unlawful surveillance. You're required to stay at least 200 feet away from Judge Monroe and her family." The color drained from her face. Her lips trembled, but for once, she had no words. The camera phones caught every second of it. I turned to the onlookers. "For anyone wondering," I said, "this isn't about power, it's about fairness." My daughter was humiliated and harassed. Every child deserves safety, even from adults who forget what decency means. The neighbors nodded, murmuring their agreement. Karen stood frozen, papers shaking in her hands. The reality of her actions finally crashing down. That evening, Emily sat beside me on the porch. The air was quiet again, peaceful. She asked softly, "Is it over now, Mom?" I smiled and brushed her hair back. "Yes, sweetheart. Justice was served, exactly how it should be." The next week, Karen's house went up for sale. No one missed her clipboard. No one missed her drama. And the park, where it all began, felt warm and safe again. Sometimes karma doesn't wait. Sometimes justice really is instant. Another day, another Karen learning her lesson. Smash that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more HOA and Karen justice stories.